Can you hear me at the back? Jenny, can you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. Can I trouble you to take your seat? It's a beautiful day. Whenever it's raining, it's a sign of abundance and a sign of plenty. And we are grateful for nature. Welcome, everyone. This is an important day, a remarkable day, and we are very privileged to be meeting and gathering in this outstanding campus. We are grateful to Western Sydney University because they are leaving and creating marks and pillars for us as a community to become a beacon of hope. And to them we say thank you, and obviously we acknowledge Walker Corporation who made this building possible. Well, good afternoon and welcome to Canterbury Bankstown Chamber of Commerce, a special event focusing on celebrating people with disability. I did write something special, so I'd love to proceed with it. People with disabilities are individuals with unique abilities, strengths and perspectives who, with the right support and opportunities, contribute significantly to society. They demonstrate resilience, adaptability and innovation, breaking barriers and enriching communities through diverse talent and insights. This definition emphasises their capabilities and the value they bring to the world. Today is a celebration of empowerment, dignity and the strength of the community. It's a call to all of us to stand united in the belief that everyone, regardless of ability, deserves opportunity, recognition and respect. Together, let's continue to build a world where every person is not just accepted, but valued for the unique gifts they bring to our collective journey. On behalf of the board, I wish to acknowledge the presence of the Honourable Bill Shorten MP, Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme of Australia. Can I quickly invite our board members to stand, please? We have with us Jason, Antoinette and Jeff. And thank you to your presence today. And we have with us Minister Shorten staff, Luke Turner and Antonia Maggi. And today's event cannot be possible without sponsors. So to our major sponsor here today, My Guardian, your first choice for aged care and disability care, has become leader across New South Wales, now with the team of over 550 and helping over 2,500 families. To our event supporters, Helping Care offer a broad range of services to suit your needs. Disability Forever Homes is a trusted partner and a specialist disability accommodation. Everything we do at My Guardian is based on one simple philosophy. We are here for you. So if I may please invite Jade Harbour, CEO and co-founder of My Guardian, to share a few words with us.
I'm not going to press anything on this laptop and start punching in things. Okay, good. Great. So first I would like to thank the Canterbury Bankstown Chambers of Commerce for this wonderful event. This is a very thoughtful event. This is a very positive energy event that we want to build upon. Also, I would like to acknowledge and thank the Honourable Bill Shorten, Minister for NDIS, for his time and contribution. In particular, the reforms that we are seeing right now that is being put in place for the disability, people with disability, to grow and look into better choices and more control. Our journey at My Guardian started with a simple idea, me and my wife. So when we say our, the whole time we're going to say us, I, we. It's myself and my other better half. Our journey started with a simple idea: to make a positive impact through acts of volunteering. These simple acts of kindness are now transforming the lives of thousands of individuals and their families. This passion has grown into a mission to make disability all about abilities. For us, My Guardian, disabilities allow us to come together, inspire change, inspire innovation, and inspire our humanity. Because we at My Guardian believe that a world without disabilities is a world without colours. It's a black and white. And let me explain to you how and what we mean by that. Generally speaking, and this is very common to a lot of people with disabilities and their families, they go through 3 phases, and this is how they feel. This is not something that I just came up with. It's very common. The first phase is denial. This is the phase when you look at yourself in the mirror and you see everything by yourself. You don't see yourself in that mirror. And then you start questioning yourself. You start asking, why me? What have I done wrong? Or if the parents, they start asking themselves for their children, what have we done wrong? Why us? Phase 2 is the fight. This is exciting. This is us. And it feels like staring up to Mount Everest. And then you stare down and you look at your legs stuck. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. But this is the excitement. This is where innovation comes in. This is when you learn to approach life differently, look at things from a different angle, different perspective, finding new ways to be creative, and find courage to overcome the limitations of your capacity. And that's what we greatly hear in our NDIS, capacity. It's all about capacity. The third and final phase is the acceptance. It's the realization that not every mountain is meant to be climbed. And at this phase, love and compassion take over, allowing you to embrace your journey for what it is and not for what you wish it was. All of those phases create the colors of life. The denial, the fight, and the acceptance. These are the colors that fill our lives with meaning and love. And it's our purpose at My Guardian to bring out these colors, helping people with disabilities live their own story and make it heard. I'd like to thank our chairman, the Honourable John Ajaka, for the great work he has done, for the greatness and the aura he has done to our disability. A lot of you would know he played a pivotal role in pioneering choice and control, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about it. He's been a great voice to a lot of people with disabilities. What a great addition. We're winning. We could not be more excited. I think the luckiest day of my life when I married my wife. I think the second luckiest probably having John. So we're so excited because he's going to bring a lot to our board. I would like to end with a say that really inspired us and really got us to where we are. And a lot of you that know us, that this is something that's been brought up to us. The words are, it's not how much we give, but how much love we put in giving. These words by Mother Teresa truly resonate with everything we do at My Guardian and what we stand for. From us, founders, to our superheroes, the real heroes, our carers. Thank you all, and I look forward to advocating and supporting a more inclusive and colourful world for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jad. Now, it's my great honour to welcome Minister Bill Shorten as the Minister for Government Service and NDIS. He has been a strong advocate for fairness and inclusion, making a significant impact on the lives of many in Australia. Minister Shorten's leadership continues to drive important reforms that improve the accessibility and efficiency of key services in our country. We are privileged to have him here today with us. So would you please join me to welcome Minister Shorten to the microphone.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the land of the Darug and Eora peoples, and I pay my respects to Aboriginal elders, past, present and future. I come from Melbourne, and we've got a grand final this weekend where there's no Melbourne team. But that's all right. I also vote for Melbourne Storm, so we might be up here. We've got to just do the Roosters. Now I've got the necessary shaking hands with the audience out the way. I want to take this opportunity. I thank Wally and the Chamber for inviting me. I love talking about the NDIS. I want to thank our sponsors. Thanks, Jad, for your words. Mona, I appreciate very much, and John as chairman. Philip, I appreciate you helping sponsor this event. What I'd like to do in the next few minutes is unpack for you where I think the National Disability Insurance Scheme is up to, where we've come from, not just in the last 2.5 years since the election of the Albanese government, but we've come from really from the creation of the scheme. For some of you, you might have heard me say this before, and I'll try not to repeat myself, but I think there's some things we need to keep in perspective here. Let me give you some fun facts about the scheme just off the top. There's, as of the 30th of June this year, about 661,000 people who are participants. That means they receive a personal budget to support them. There's now well over 400,000 people who say that they work in the NDIS. These are big numbers. We'll announce the budget forecast that Jim Chalmers brought down in May, said that he thought the scheme would be an investment this year of about $42.4 billion. It's going to be a bit under that because we've already started to tighten up things, and it's still growing, but it's not growing as fast. So the final year under my predecessors, the Liberals, the scheme grew at 23% cost. That's big. That's unsustainable. The number of people coming onto the scheme in financial year 21-22 grew at 15%. We think the scheme for 23-24 will have only grown in investment by about 18%, which is still probably too fast a growth. The number of people entering the scheme will be more like 8% more than there were. So what we've done in the last 2.5 years is we've started to reduce the extent of the growth rate of the scheme. But let's just go back to 2008-9 when the scheme was first mentioned. I was very privileged. This is my 6th term in Parliament. I know I still look like a baby, but it's been here a while. And in my first term of Parliament, then Prime Minister Rudd made me the Junior Minister for Disability Services. The federal government didn't have such a big footprint in disability services then. And before I came into Parliament, I'd been a union rep, standing up for workers, and I thought I'd seen unfair treatment. But nothing prepared me, as I got to understand the world of disability, for the effective de facto exile which Australians with disability were living in their own country, and that goes for their carers too. I mean, I'd seen workers be injured, traumatic injuries, terrible burns, but there were sort of workers' comp systems available. But if you acquired your disability at birth, or in the blink of an eye in a sporting injury, or in the surf, or on a country road, or if you just got it by the particular DNA lottery, which is unique in every one of us, and you've got some early onset condition, life was pretty crisis-ridden. You know, it's funny to read the newspapers. Sometimes I believe what I read. But they often say there's this big battle in Australia between the left and the right. The reality is, it's in disability, it wasn't a left versus right issue, it was a crisis issue. What I mean is that if today was worse than yesterday, you'd move up a list to get some rations. And if tomorrow was going to be even worse than today, you might even finally get something. But the idea that a house has to burn down before you can get support, that you might have to relinquish your kids, that you might be in a sense of crisis, that is not the way to look after our fellow Australians. And disability, my friends, is universal. It's any of us or someone we love. It is universal. So what I learned in my first term of office, I promise you I'm not going to go through each week of the last 17 years, but what I learned is that the system, there was no system. And that whilst there had been significant advances, and I must say this, families that organised groups of carers, disability activists that achieved legislative change, it wasn't a blank page that I came across. But what I saw is that the big problem in life is not your disability. That's just one aspect of you. The big problem in life, dare I say it, is a lack of money and a lack of power. These are universal ills. But for people with disability, they were coasting along the bottom with our Indigenous Australians for poor outcomes, which was creating a second-class system for different Australians merely because of an attribute. And we used to look at carers and say they're saints. And we'd look at people with disabilities and say, send them to daycare. Nothing can be done. And I'm talking about the profoundly and severely disabled. So I came on this idea that maybe the best person to take charge of someone's life is the person themselves and their family. Not a bureaucracy, not a charity, although they're all very crucial and very important things and services. And that was the sort of left-right idea of it all. Bit of generous support, tick, but a bit where individuals and families, and you allocate resources themselves. You move people from being charity to being consumers. So I know I was the first politician to ever use the words, what's an acronym actually, NDIS, the words National Disability Insurance Scheme. But never in my wildest imaginings when I was convincing Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd to create an NDIS did I automatically think that now I'd be telling you it's north of $40 billion, 660,000. There's an industry called the NDIS, it's 400,000 people. It's amazing. I had the privilege recently of attending the United Nations, leading a delegation on behalf of Australia to talk about, it was where all the nation states of the UN report what's going on in disability. We are ahead of the rest of the world. Not in every single aspect. Education we should be doing better, jobs we should be doing better, I get that. Some of the, designer houses we should be doing better. But in terms of investment, this country, our home, is investing more resources in the lives of people with disability than any other country on the planet. Now, I know that doesn't get you as many interests as, gold medal count, but that's something I'm proud of, and that's something we should all be proud of. What I found, though, is, of course, in 2013, my team came second in the elections, and the others came in, and listen, they built up the scheme. All right, so there were 4 trial sites at the change of government when Tony Abbott became Prime Minister. And by the time I became the Minister, there were over 500,000 people on the scheme. So credit, they built it up. But what I found, and now I get to the heart of what we've done, is that there are probably some mistakes made in the last 10 years which we now need to correct. This scheme, though, I always start from the view, is changing lives for the better. It is changing hundreds of thousands of lives for the better, and that's fantastic. We see new businesses investing in it. The great irony is that in 2008, 2009, I looked at aged care and they had packages, whereas disability was block funding to services. And I was sort of like the neighbour in the disability house of broken glass, overgrown weeds, nothing worked. And aged care seemed to have trimmed lawns and, the sprinkler went on and stuff happened. The great irony, of course, is that we're now more generously funded than aged care. And aged care had, they would look sort of jealously at us now, and Labor's put in some packages to improve aged care, but it's taken a while. Disability, someone online leapt ahead, which is not a sentence you often say about disability funding. But what we found is we made the following 6 or 7 changes, and then maybe we can get into question and answer or whatever the format you want to do. Well, first thing I found is that we needed to revitalise the leadership of the agency. The NDIS is administered by the National Disability Insurance Agency, and they have a board. Now, it's quite a complex structure because the states contribute 50% of the funding to the NDIS and the feds contribute 50%. Although the states would make great negotiators in the Casbah because they saw the feds coming, and at this point the states are contributing somehow about 32%, and we contribute about 68%. But that's all right. Never get between, was it Keating who said never get between a premier and a pot of money? So they were very clever. But having said that, they've really come to the board, and I'm going to talk a bit more about the role of the states. So meant to be jointly funded. But But what's happened is that, in essence, my analysis in those first months after becoming minister is the NDIS is in danger of being the only lifeboat in the ocean. In other words, it's NDIS or nothing. And that wasn't what was meant to be. The NDIS is meant to be for the people with the most profound and severe impairments. But too often hospitals will say an outpatients, if they think you're on the NDIS, well, everything's an NDIS matter. I see in schools, I kid you not, where they don't have their own speech pathologist or physio, I see kids using their packages, bringing in external providers into the school system. That wasn't really the intention of the scheme. I'm not saying we're going to stop that, but I'm just saying that wasn't the intention of the scheme. Literally, how inefficient is it to have half a dozen or a dozen allied health professionals visiting schools to see one kid, and there's other kids who've got learning needs. So that's one problem where you thought it can't be the only lifeboat in the ocean. Now, to be fair, the other things we found is that the hospital system was clogged up with NDIS participants who were fit for discharge but nowhere to go, and the planning process was taking forever. My predecessors didn't really, as business people here would know, you can't solve a problem until you're measuring it. My predecessors didn't really measure how long people were waiting in hospital, but the states did. And so the average wait time, for example, in Victoria was 160 days between fit for discharge and discharge. That is not a good use of a hospital bed. That's not good for the participant. It's just not a good system. We've now got the wait time down to about, on average, 25 days. Another issue was that a lot of NDIS participants, nearly 1% of all people on the scheme were in the courts fighting with the government about their package. We got the percentage down. We've got rid of 95% of the legacy cases. We've resolved them. It was stupid litigation happening. It was not providing information to participants or their advocates till the door of the court. Average wait time, once you filed in the AAT, was 31 weeks. We've got that down to about 17 weeks for the remaining disagreements. So there are things. The other thing we found with the agency is that in 2017, there were about 170,000 people on the scheme, but believe it or not, there were about 4,000 direct employees of the agency. When I became minister, there were 500,000 plus people on the scheme and 4,000 direct employees of the agency. So that's a recipe for failure, isn't it? I'm not saying public servants, we've put in an extra 2,000. We're gradually working through systems. I know one of the issues some of you have is waiting times. We're really trying to triage that and get those lists down. We also found there was no back office payment scrutiny. I kid you not, this next fact, that I discovered after I put my own leadership in, that if you put in an invoice, and by the way, this loophole no longer exists. I'm not saying to use it, but just saying, if you know someone. If you put an invoice in between 5 and 6:30, it would never get checked. You just get paid. Like 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. But no, that's a good question you asked. That means you haven't done it. Or you may be throwing me off. Very clever. But mind you, between 9 and 5, we'd, on a good day, check 21 invoices. Wow. Like there's thousands a day. Now we're checking a lot more now. And we've moved a lot of the post-checking team to the pre-checking. They've become the pre-checking team. And we're putting in software, but it takes a while to sort this out. So there wasn't a lot of scrutiny. An invoice could go in for $20,000, and we weren't even asking for an ABN, not that the ABN is necessarily verifiable ID. So there's challenges. So with the best of intent, the scheme wasn't being run efficiently well. Of the 11 top reports in the agency when I became minister, 10 are gone. We've got new people in. The board's had a bit of regeneration. Half the people on the board of the scheme, which is co-appointed by a majority of states and myself, are people with lived experience. Kurt Fernley, the great Australian champion Paralympian, who's a leader and, he's got more charisma in his little finger than, Question Time has in an hour and 10 minutes. He's now the chair of the NDIA. We've got people with lived experience at the very top. 17% of the agency are people with disability who work there. So we've shaken up the administration. We set up a fraud fusion task force. I know this is like something which you just see on a comedy show, But the 21 agencies now talk to each other about tracking payments. Like, that didn't happen. The level of naivety is quite staggering. And so now we're just tracking things. Again, none of what I've said so far. Get better leaders in, have more people with lived experience, focus on people not having to go to court, focus on getting people out of hospital. We did a big review and we've engaged with the states. I said I'd come back to them. The review has said we need to set up what we call foundational services. I mean, unfortunately, the NDIA attracts jargon like a barbecue attracts flies. I'm sorry for the jargon. You need a PhD in jargon. Foundational services are essentially services for people who don't need or not eligible for the NDIS but still need interventions and support. And we're going to start with the kids. So my colleague Amanda Rishworth, the Minister for Social Services, is working on that. Kate Washington and here in New South Wales and all the states. And we hope to start rolling out the start of them from July of next year. But the beauty is the states have also said, see, the reason why the state-federal contribution got out of whack is they would increase their contribution every year by 4%. But if the scheme's growing at 23%, then that means Uncle Commonwealth's picking up the big end of the tab. We've said we want to get growth to 8%, and let me just stress that because some of the Greens are behaving like scallywags. They've said that any reduction in the growth rate is a cut to the scheme. It's not. We're trying to see the scheme grow at 8%. Like if you had an 8% guaranteed growth, you'd say, I'll take that, thank you. So we need to get it down. But what the states have said they'll do is by 2028, they will contribute their contribution, factoring in at an 8% growth rate. So they're fed income. And I know that when the states are putting in more money, they're going to be more interested. And they've also said they'll work with some foundational supports. I mean, there's a bit of fear and anxiety about foundational supports. What does it mean? Does it mean hundreds of thousands of people are pushed off the scheme? No, it doesn't. We are assuming that the scheme will go up in participants from this year, 30th of June, 661,000, to north of 700,000 next year. We are assuming, I mean, we've come in a bit below 42.4 billion, which I think is great, when the numbers are still sort of very big. That we'll spend north of $46 billion in financial year 24-25. So if someone says this is all cuts, it's not. But we understand, and you understand as people who work in the sector or people who are interested or got neighbours on the scheme, that there is a portion of the community who's having a lend of us. Most service providers are excellent, but some are scallywags, unethical. And unethical, just so you understand what I define by unethical could be charging a mum with an NDIS participant child more for the same physio than someone else, or even just charging more for the cancellation fee. Come on, let's not do that. If it's a distinct service, charge what it's worth, no problems. But no more wedding tax. This idea that some contractors can build a veranda on the second story of their beach house on the Central Coast off charging government money. It's a bit of a cop-out to say it's government money. It's actually participants' money funded by taxpayers. So we've actually made it illegal to charge for the ACCC, to charge dual prices for same service. And we now require providers to keep their pricing data. So, the good one's nothing to worry about. And if you're doing it, you probably should be worried. But more than that, that's one level of that's sort of called opportunism. But then there's the people who put in the fake invoices. You will get caught now. We're now investigating $1 billion of transactions. We now have 56 people in court or headed to court. We now have over 500 active investigations. We've now invested $160 million. The other thing is, there was meant to be a thing called a Safeguards Commission created when we created the NDIS, but my predecessors didn't get around to creating that for 4 years after the NDIS. And they only created it, Malcolm was the Prime Minister, then I was the Leader of the Opposition, because I called for a Disability Royal Commission. They said, we don't need Bill's Royal Commission, we'll just create the Safeguards Commission. But the Safeguards Commission, when I became Minister, had 367 staff. To cover 600,000 people or 550,000 people, not enough. That now has 1,052 staff. It's now got I put in an acting head of the Safeguards Commission when the previous one resigned, He's a former head of the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission. So for 6 months, and he's given me a whole set of views on what to do. We've now appointed a lovely, very capable person to be the new CEO, Louise Glanville from Victorian Legal Aid. But Mike Phelan, who was the interim, I said, what's it like, Mike, now you've stuck your head under the bonnet? He said, we have state-of-the-art investigation systems at the Safeguards Commission for 1988. This is what he said to me in 2024. So we are upgrading our systems. And all of this is about making sure that the investment gets through to the people for whom the scheme was designed. That is all that motivates me. I think we fund disability more than ever before. I think there's enough money in the system. But one of our challenges also is that the planning and budget setting process has been very complex. And it's a bit like if you were building a house. The way we build plans under the scheme, and we're changing this, is you haggle over the price of every brick in the house, which just leads to plenty of opportunities to argue, and also, for those of you who are shrewd business types, plenty of chances the prices go up. Because if every brick's a negotiation, that's difficult. So our recent legal reforms, which we got through, and I acknowledge the work of Michael Sukkar, the Liberal Shadow Minister, we got it through. The Greens just disappeared off into irrelevant land. What we've done there is created a new legal basis so that we do top-down plans. We want to do a needs assessment. One of the other problems in the scheme, as I discovered, has become a two-class scheme. To use a very simple cliche, and I don't mean to cause offence, but if you are rich, living in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and you know the right people to write the right reports, you can get a decent package. But if you're battling to get someone, you've got a waiting list to get your kid in to see a psychologist in the West, and this could be not just Sydney, it's Melbourne too and other places. You just don't get the same packages. So what we want to do is create more equity. So in the future, you'll sit down, we'll have a navigator at first. Say you've got a child that's going on a non-standard developmental journey, you'll talk to a navigator. Well, what does this all mean? And hopefully they'll be embedded at councils or local operations. You go there. It might be you don't need the NDIS. It might be that just the parents need to go to a parent-to-parent group. It is so liberating for families of disabled kids to find another family going through the same stuff. It's like being in a foreign country and no one understands your language until you meet a parent who's going through the same thing. All of a sudden, you get the goosebumps. At last, someone understands what I'm doing and what I'm going through. But we'll get a budget plan, and you'll be centred. I mean, one of the problems currently, it'll be a top-down plan. In other words, what are your needs? What are your aspirations? Rather than haggling over each item. And we also want to look at a system, and this is my preference, the government hasn't finalised it, where the government pays for the report. Because report writing's become its own micro-industry. So we sort of want to tighten that up and just do that. But the other thing is that when you get your plan, you'll then go back and talk to the same person about what it means. Too often I found people who would go and meet a planner, they have a great meeting. But then they, open up the proverbial mail and they feel they've got someone else's plan. And it's very frustrating. So we want to improve the calibre of our staff. They're great people who work at the agency, but we need to train them more. And we need to train up an allied health professional workforce. So I get that none of these changes happen overnight. There are a couple which will be happening soon now. We also recognise build supports outside the scheme, improve the budget planning process, improve the needs assessment process. That'll be done by co-design. But one of the big issues that came out of this review, which we did for 12 months in 2023, started in 2022, is this unusual world where you have registered and unregistered suppliers of services. Like, you don't get the option to have a driver's licence in this country. And I get registration doesn't automatically guarantee brilliant service. I'm not saying that. And I get registration shouldn't be one size fits all. So we're going to go to a principles-based, risk-based registration system. If you're doing highly complicated tasks, which involve a high level of safety, then you are going to have to meet real criteria. If all you're doing is a disability support worker driving someone to the shops and back, I do want to know that you've got a driver's licence, that you exist. So there'll be different tiers of registration. And for some businesses, like a Bunnings, who, maybe they sell things to people on the planet. I can ask Bunnings to, I know who Bunnings are. The other point is for allied health professionals, they sometimes get frustrated at one, having to write reports all the time rather than actually deliver treatment. So we want to work on that and stop that so much. But the other thing is, they say, why do we have to register with you when we're already registered with another health agency? So what we want to do is, rather than tell the government everything as if it's a brand new, Groundhog Day, we want to build in a registration system which says if you're already registered, that's good. So let's just do the polish on the NDIS component rather than starting from the start. But we'll keep consulting, working through. That'll take a couple of years to set up. But some people say that making most of the service providers be registered is sort of communism, or it's, red tape. No, it's not. If you want taxpayer money delivering a service to a person, I want to know who you are. I want to know, can you do what you're meant to do? I'd like to know that you have some quality in what you do. This is basic. You don't let anyone in the Medicare system just say, I'm a shaman from a particular animistic faith and therefore I've defined myself. Just because you might be an expert in wilderness therapy, good, doesn't mean you automatically get to deliver a service and get rebated for it. That's the other thing we're going to do, and that's coming up sooner rather than later, like next month. We're going to list what can be NDIS supports and what are not NDIS supports. But it's built from the principle that the NDIS was never meant to replace the mainstream. But we've been catching some education department areas say that if the school can't cope with your kid, the NDIS will homeschool your kid. That's the job of the education system. That's not me treating anyone as a political footballer. It's just saying, we've all got a job here to do, not just one scheme. But also there's plenty of non-evidence-based therapies which are getting invoiced, and we want to make sure that it's real. So the lists will come out. We've been consulting. We've had 7,000 responses already. The sort of unusual thing about the last 2.5 years is that I'm going too fast and too slowly at exactly the same time. I'll wrap up here, and there's plenty we haven't got to yet, but I will say this. What has driven me for the last 850 days, and will drive me for the next 150 days, is to politician-proof the scheme. Not because I think that our politicians are bad people, but it's an interesting test to make sure we've got a scheme which is sustainable. They're going to be disabled kids born in the future. There are going to be people who are going to have their DNA particular lottery. It's going to mean you might develop MS or MND. Some people will have psychosocial disorders which are so impairing you're going to need assistance. You're going to need carers. There are some people now getting looked after who, when their parents no longer can, are going to need that promise being kept that they're still going to get someone who will care for them with a level of love and commitment. So when I say politician-proof, what I mean is that I want to set the rail tracks, embed them, so everyone knows where we're going. There are some people who say the scheme is too unaffordable. I don't share that view. And just go and talk to someone who's getting life-changing benefits. But there's others who say we shouldn't do any change. And that's dangerous too, because you can't keep growing at the rate it's growing. And we do have to straighten it up. I was just at the Bankstown Services Australia office before I came here, because I'm also in charge of government services. And I got to speak to 4 staff who've been there for basically 36 to 40 years. They were there at the start of Medicare. It's about 156 years of experience amongst these 4 of your fellow citizens just across at the shopping centre. And they were talking about when Medicare was set up. And I said, did you have a bit of fraud then? Oh, yeah. And I said, how was it? I said, we learned a lot. So I would just say to you about the NDIS. It is a world-leading scheme. It is changing hundreds of thousands of lives. It's amazing. If I had stood in front of you in 2008 and said, hi, you've never heard of me, but in the next 15 years you're all going to work in an industry which didn't exist, called NDIS. You're going to invest in it. We're going to see more carers able to work. We're going to see more people with disabilities not being socially isolated. That we're going to see massive investment in early intervention with kids or people with psychosocial conditions. That we're going to have people being able to move out of home and get care. And it'll be over $40 billion and there'll be 661,000 people in it. You'd have said, who is this idiot? But just remember when we talk about the NDIS, for all of its problems, and it does have some, we've come a tremendously long way. You know, when people say that politics is broken, sometimes if you watch Question Time you can form that view, not unreasonably. And some issues just haven't moved in the 21st century. But if you think about it, in the 1980s Medicare was set up. In the 1990s universal superannuation was established. We have established a personal budget universal scheme for people with profound and severe disability, which the rest of the world's interested in. We just now need to make sure it's there for the future, the money's getting through to the people for whom the scheme was originally designed, and that we start focusing on the quality of services, not just the price of services. And I think we can do all of that and still grow, but at a more measured rate, which means that whoever is in power, one thing that everyone knows is the NDIS is working, it's running on its train tracks, so let's not muck around with it. Let's just keep a consistent promise to our fellow Australians. Thanks very much, Wally, for having me to talk to you.
Thank you, Minister Shorten. Clearly, you're a man of humility and humanity, and the media doesn't give you justice. You're close to the heart. We're going to go through a panel, and the Minister is generous with his time, so he's going to allow the last 10 minutes before 2 o'clock to sort of mingle, say hello and take some photos with us as well. So if I may introduce the panel, the Honourable John Ajaka, Chairman of My Guardian, Aged Care and Disability Care. John, if I can trouble you make your way to the seat. He entered New South Wales Parliament in 2007 as a member of the Legislative Council, bringing with him years of legal experience. Mr. Ajaka quickly became a leading advocate for disability rights and inclusive communities. Bruno Calafiata, Director of BC Property Agent. Bruno is a seasoned real estate agent with 30 years of experience specialising in property investment. Mona Salem, Director and Founder at Hope and Care, a dedicated organisation that advocates for the rights and inclusion of people with disability, inspired by a deep personal connection and a desire to honour her daughter legacy. Ben Fioramonti, General Manager, Children, Families and Disability Support at Settlement Service International. Abraham is an amazing person. Abraham, you can make your way to the front. He's passionate about helping our community to be more accessible for people with disability. Being diagnosed with a neuromuscular disorder at the age of 5. The muscles in his legs become weaker, so from the age of 15, he started using a powered wheelchair. Friends, we have an amazing panel, different background and experience, but now the person to lead that panel is Philip Petrie, Chief Executive Officer for Olivia Limited. And Philip is a Community Service Sector Director and Chair for Community and Disability Support Circle, and a Director at the National Disability Service and Chair of New South Wales NDS, and today is a panel moderator. Philip.
Thank you, Wally. Great to see so many people that have braved the weather to come here today to talk about this, or to discuss this very, very important topic. I'm going to take this opportunity, it might be the last time I get to do this, to actually make a personal thanks to the Minister. Bill, we've kind of worked alongside each other on a number of different things over the years. Your dedication and commitment is going to be something that's going to be very, very hard to replace. So we're all sitting around in trepidation at the moment wondering who's going to fill your space, but I'm sure that the legacy of the work that you've done over all of these years, that as a sector we'll get behind the new Minister and certainly make sure that the NDS progresses, and particularly the foundational supports component at a state level. I did actually have a few sort of introductory notes that I wrote down, and I've actually just kind of thrown them out because Bill stole all my thunder, and Jad as well. So, you know, I just wanted to sort of say that everything that they've said I fully support. Disability is an extremely important topic. And I think as a community, I don't think we necessarily fully understand why it is so important.
You came here today, many of you, to the Chamber of Commerce, as you do on all of the things the situations that Wally sets up, to network, to talk about business, to talk about our business and our contribution to our local community. Disability is extremely important because it affects everybody in this room. Everybody has a story to tell, whether it's a personal journey, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend. I need to put the microphone up. I'm a bit taller than everybody else. My apologies. Friends, neighbours, everybody is touched by disability in some way. I have a personal journey with disability. I left school when I was 17, having grown up walking a very fine line of possibly being in the same situation as Ibby down the end there and being in a wheelchair. I was born with a physical condition that I was very lucky was able to be fixed, which meant that I could walk as a child, and I have grown since then. But that journey has meant that my commitment to disability has been something that's very, very deep and ingrained in why I believe I was put on this particular planet. I've fought really hard for people with a disability, and I have experienced in 43 years massive change. Massive change in social policy, in community attitudes, and particularly the emergence of the recognition of the human rights of all Australians, including people with a disability. We've seen massive change since the introduction of the NDIS. We are going to see a hell of a lot more change in coming years, and it's not going to stop. But it's all got to be for the good. You can all be part of that change as we strive as a community to be more inclusive and to stop putting barriers in the way of people that want to participate and be included in life in the community. I believe the NDIS has been a massive step forward in giving people the opportunity of choice and control. But we've got a long way to go, and certainly the Minister has alluded to a lot of the work that we need to do to make sure that that system is working appropriately to achieving the right outcomes. Unfortunately, there are still an awful lot of people who are missing out on services, and we need to make sure that we correct that imbalance. People are thriving with a disability. Because of the NDIS, we need to make sure that everybody with a disability has the opportunity to thrive in their community. Unfortunately, perceptions, and I think in every conversation I have with people, and I've had a few today, perceptions have been skewed a little bit by the way that the media portrays what's going on in regards to disability. It tends to be rather negative. We see lots of things that go on in regards to talking about the place being, besieged by fraudsters and people that are trying to rip off the system. There are more stories of good than there are bad. It would be great if we actually had the opportunity to hear them. Hopefully today what we can do is maybe shift some of the perceptions or ideas that you have about disability by talking about some of the more local and personal experiences of not only providers but business leaders, people who've been in government, but also for people that actually have lived experience in disability. So I'll be quiet now and get off my hobby horse because I could stand here all day talking about this. I'm going to start with John. And the reason why I'm going to start with John is John didn't realise when we met, but he was kind of my boss at one point because I used to work in government. And as the ex-Minister of Disability in New South Wales, he played a really big part in what was a movement by a group of people who saw that an opportunity was there to try and shift the balance of control back to people with a disability. So you were there when it was being explored, John. You were active as an advocate. You saw the scheme commence. It's been 11 years since the trial started in New South Wales. But looking back on the old system, reflecting on where we are today, how do you see it? What's changed?
Thank you for the question. Thanks for the question. Maybe it's best if I start. That's it, thank you. Look, if I could start this way, the first thing, Mr. Shorten, absolutely concur with everything you said, and take this opportunity to thank you for all of your incredible service. And I really do believe you've come in at a time where you've helped fix, and I'll use the word fix, the NDIS, the NDIA agency, etc. It kind of drifted a little bit from where it was intended to be when I was the State Minister, and I congratulate you, and I know that you've got a lot more to do, and it's wonderful that you're doing it. But if I can start this, day one you're a minister, Secretary of the Department comes in, hands you a big white arch lever folder, and you think, says you've got to get your head around this by tonight. Okay, thank you. Deputy Secretary comes in, hands you a white lever, and you say, I've already got one of those. Of course, he looks at you with shock and horror because it's a completely different white lever. By the end of the day of being sworn in, I had 13. Still remember the number 13 white levers that I was supposed to read by that night. But what dawned on me, and what I could never understand, is why I, as Minister, decided who, when, what, why, and where people with disability receive the services. What services did they receive? When did they receive it? Who provided the service? Where they live? I mean, it was ludicrous to think the Minister would decide that, or his bureaucrats would decide that. I get to choose those things for myself. My family get to choose those things for themselves. Why would a person with a disability be denied that? How is that being Australian, all-encompassing, all-inclusive? So that needed to stop. So of course, we all, federal, state, came up with that wonderful term, choice and control. And it was all about choice and control. And that is a wonderful thing. But choice and control has to have safeguards. And this is where, in some ways, they kind of lost their way. But the safeguards that were meant to commence from day one were not put in place on day one. And suddenly, people with disability who did have choice and control, like any consumer, were being mistreated by those that did not have the right intentions, weren't there from a caring perspective, they were there simply from a business perspective, making money and nothing else. And so, bringing in the safeguards to ensure that the scheme can continue. The second thing that I recall from day one, you go around with the media saying it repeatedly, so you never forget it, was that as a State Minister I had a budget of $3.4 billion. I looked after 90,000 people with disability. By merging with the Commonwealth Government with the NDIA, that budget went to $6.5 billion, and it went from 90,000 people to 140,000. So it was wonderful to be able to say from day one, we're looking at helping 50,000 more people with disability to be able to receive the funding they need, choice and control within their lives. The third thing that I recall is we were the first state that signed up, so we got the feds had all the responsibility, and Minister Shorten mentioned that. So we only have to provide 4% each and every year. If the scheme grew by 20 or 30%, the federal government signed within the contract. That was a mistake, Mr. Shorten. It really was. We should not have done that, because what we did is we planned where the scheme should grow and should grow properly. And I'm pleased to see that the states have come together to rectify that situation. So I do say this, there are some extraordinary organisations out there. The state government relinquished all control. We stopped providing services. We should not have been providing services. It needed to be provided by the private sector, and we were there to help the private sector to do that. If I can give you three really good examples. One great change. I was shattered the first time I walked into an institution accommodation at Stockton. literally broke my heart when I walked in there. Seeing hundreds of people living with a disability. It wasn't a home, it was an institution in every respect. Now, I sat on the Corrective Services Committee, and I couldn't see any difference of walking through a corrective services and walking through. Now, they were trying their best to start with wonderful, but the reality is that's not how people with disability should live. You get to live in your home, why can't they get to live in their home? So transitioning to the group homes, etc., that is one wonderful, massive change. And more work needs to be done. We need more accommodation, we need more providers, but it's the right way to go, getting away from it. The second example, if I can give, is this. I still remember a family coming where, a young girl with a disability, her funding would only allow her to go swimming for recreation. She hated swimming, and the chlorine caused huge allergy problems for her. The department would not change it. All she wanted to do was go horse riding. She got her NPO's package, swimming stopped, horse riding started. She got to live the life she wanted to. And that is another good, massive change. And finally, from an accommodation point of view, you go around to all the group homes, all the private homes, etc., and you can see people with disability living in their home. So they're all wonderful services. I'm honoured to be part of an organisation, My Guardian, that, firsthand provides care in a compassionate way, the right way, the correct way, a registered provider. And I must say, Mr. Short, I'm a great believer from day one that there should be registered providers. Different scales, different levels, no different from medical. You're not all registered to be a specialist, but you are registered at different levels. Same with lawyers, we're all registered at different levels, and that's the way that it should be. So seeing these changes coming into effect and seeing that people with disability really do get choice and control with safeguards, for me, I'm incredibly proud to have been part of that from the beginning of the journey, and now having come in full circle by being with My Guardian, still being part of that journey.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that you talked about, John, was choice and control. I'm going to ask Mona a question. Hope and Care prides itself on ensuring that people have choice and control through the way that you provide services to people. And you champion this in your organisation. How do you do that? How do you ensure that people coming to you for a service have choice and control?
Being in the industry for over 8 years now, I have noticed that a lot of participants and their families are not really educated enough on their plans. So any participant of ours that comes through our doors and wants to utilise our services, it is actually a must that we educate them on the supports that they receive, what the funding is for, how they can use it, and we really focus on person-centred supports. Obviously, every single NDIS plan has a short-term goal, has a medium-term goal, and a long-term goal. So we obviously work really closely with the participant to help them achieve their goals. Yeah, and a prime example of that isn't just Igby, who's my Chief Financial Officer at Hope and Care, but actually someone in the audience, Andrew. Do you want to just stand up and just give us a bit of a wave? Andrew came to Hope and Care 2 years ago and obviously didn't know what an NDIS plan was about. We educated Andrew and worked together with him to achieve his goals. And now, 2 years on, he proudly wears the Hope and Care shirt. He's employed by us. And Minister Bill Shorten, Andrew doesn't really require much of his core support funding because now he's able to financially support himself. So I can't stress enough, the NDIS promotes independence. It's not about promoting dependency, it's all about promoting independence, and that's really what the NDIS is about. Thank you.
Great answer. Well done, Andrew. Awesome. Ibrahim, you work at Hope and Care as well. You know, one of the things that I've heard Mona say is she doesn't turn people away that are in need. You were a person who was really in need at one point. What did Mona and Hope and Care do for you?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I would just like to say to all children, thank you for that incredible tenure as your role as, the Minister for the NIS. You've done amazing work, providing funds for the individuals to be able to, get the support and lead independent lives. For me, being on the NIS, it meant that, it allowed me, because I didn't have the knowledge, and I do have a Catholic background, so it allowed me to, manage my own plan to help give me the support that I need to help me live the life I want. And that's what it's all about. But I did, go to university. I did go to Washington University some time ago. I did my degrees. I did study. However, at the time I was looking for employment. And I did find that challenging. And but also with unemployment, getting job interviews, going to job interviews, you have to always do that research. And also, you have to always ask the questions, what if, And there was always confidence, but confidence was low, because I had a physical disability. And I get that myself. I'll never get a job. I'm not good enough. But I was well educated. And then I approached Mona in there. She saw that I was qualified. She saw that I was a suitable person to be involved in home care. And so we spoke. We showed them my resume, I had the qualifications. She goes, yep, that's your job. So here I am, a few years later.
4 years later, well done.
Encouraging individuals like myself, it was a facility to be out in the community, be more included. So, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
10% of my employees have come off the NDIS and now on payroll, which is something I'm extremely proud of. So there you go.
If we had a lot more time, we could talk about inclusion and how that actually works, but you're going to get just a taste of that today. And I think Ibrahim's story is an amazing journey where he's had somebody that's looked past his wheelchair and his disability and seen the value of what he brings to a business environment. It's just amazing. So well done. Thank you. And Mona too for your vision. You raised the issue of people not being aware of their plan and what to do with it, and this has been an inherent problem in the scheme for a long time. And I know one of the things that the scheme did was it introduced support coordinators, but there was also local area coordinators. Ben, you manage one of the, I think 4 or 5 organisations that provides local area coordination. Just tell us a little bit about what local area coordinators do and how that works.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. So there's about 26 partners nationally that make up the Partners in the Community program. So that includes the local area coordination program. So SSI has been delivering LAC in Sydney and South West Sydney since 2020. So it's quite, as we know, it's quite a diverse. These are quite diverse areas, and roughly 25% of these areas make up of participants who identify as being from a fault background. So naturally, our teams are quite diverse as well. 50% are born overseas. We've got 5% of our workforce identified as First Nations, 25% 21% of people identify as having a disability and or severe chronic health condition. So that's certainly helped us, and we've got a diverse workforce that mirrors the districts that we are working within. In terms of what the LAC does, it's actually quite broad. In fact, I probably talk all day about what the LACs do. It starts with, up until recently, it was plan builds, but of course, plan implementations, plan reviews, all those exciting things. But aside from the plan-based functions, which most people know about, the LACs are actually doing quite a lot of work in terms of individual and community capacity building, and there's a community development element to what we do as well. So I feel that that's spoken about less. People know less about what the LAC is doing in that space. So that can include working with community groups, religious groups around breaking down cultural and social stigma associated with disability, working with local employees around how to support recruit people with disability and support them in the workforce and the benefits that they bring into the workforce. And of course, all the work that we do is guided by lived experience work group as well, which everyone is a part of, and we're very grateful for him. So it is really, really extensive. Now, all of these things that the LAC does, that wasn't the original intent of the local area coordinator role. So that really started out with, it should have been more focused around capacity building elements, linking people to, community mainstream supports and so on. So I think just wrapping up, one of the things that we are excited about is the review recommendations in terms of, guiding things into, which is guiding a lot of the roles and responsibilities of LAC into the navigator and also the foundational support models, which is quite exciting as well.
So navigators are something that the government has pretty much committed to doing. We don't really know a lot of detail about what it's going to look like in the long run, but certainly your business model is about to change.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And anyone who hasn't seen even the summary of the NDS review recommendations, I highly recommend you have a look. But just to sort of, the goal is just to give a high-level view of what the navigator's role would look like. I'd say it looks quite similar to how you would perceive the original intent of the LAC role. So there will be, it's anticipated it will have a plan implementation component. It will also have that capacity building elements and so on. Whereas foundational supports is really going to be around, I guess all the wraparound stuff, early intervention work, peer networks, modifications, aids, all sorts of things. So we're excited about that, and also the delineation that will create, a clarity between roles.
Great, thank you. Bruno, why do we have a property, an agent in the property market on stage talking about disability? What is it that your organisation brings? Yeah, what is it that your organisation brings to the disability community?
Okay, so what we do is help people build SDA plans around the whole country.
What's SDA?
And SDA is a Specialty Disability Accommodation Home.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Shorten said that before that a person could be in a hospital for over 160 days before they can place. And that's been now shortened to about 30 days, or 25 days as he said. Which is great, because imagine before NDIS where a person was in a nursing home or in a hospital bed and they were living life. And imagine you're in a nursing home and your best friend is someone that's 90 and you're 30. That can't do too much to your self-esteem and how you feel about yourself. So providing a home or an SDA home that your scheme has helped many participants to go into, I suppose it gives you a level of freedom. Yes, it's choice, and yes, they're taking control of their own life,
but it's also a little bit about how they feel about themselves, and it's a little bit of normality. And we help investors and people who can purchase these homes around the country to place a participant. And we only did a talk last night where, if you look at the March quarter's report, there's nearly 8,000 participants with funding for a home, which that are not basically not in homes yet around the country for various reasons. Only last week, and Mr. Shorten did say that up here that disability can come at you at any point in your life. Yeah. So there was a participant last week who was in a car accident. It wasn't last week that he was in a car, but he was in a car accident, lost both his legs, in a hospital, and he would have been there for a very long time. But he's now found a home to go into in Victoria that he can now, have his support team there helping him in his own home. We've got a housing crisis, there's no discussion about that. We know that the situation is pretty bad. But for somebody who's got special accessibility needs, finding the right home is extremely difficult, even in a market where you can't even find a house that doesn't have accessibility issues.
Well, I think that's, and Mr. Shorten can tell us, and I believe that's why they raised the income per room cost to place an individual into a home. And I'm not saying into a room home where it's where there's too many people, but at least into a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom where there's maybe 2 participants or 3 participants that all get along. That problem needs to be solved around the country, and we help solve that problem.
Great, thank you. I'm getting the wind up. We're running out of time, and we do. I think Wally wants to just take the opportunity for the last couple of minutes with the Minister here. I hope you've got a little bit out of the panel. Thank you, guys. I know it's extremely nerve-wracking putting yourself up there. You've done really well. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your insights. I really do look forward to the opportunity with the Chamber to do some more of these, because I think one of the most important things we want to look at is employment, given that most of you in the room are employers or employees. And we've got a huge opportunity here, so I'm looking forward to another opportunity, but thanks everybody.
Thank you, Philip, and I appreciate your time, and I'm grateful for the panel, but we're trying to manage and work closely with the Minister. Minister, I would love you to do some closing remarks, and after that, proper presentation, please.
Can I just also thank the panel? Can we give them another round of applause? I think there are a lot of good insights there. Just a couple of points which arose in the panel discussion, which I'm sure you're thinking about, and without sort of repeating all the magic they had. First of all, just to John Ajaka, that was really important what he said. It was important because when both the major parties are on the same page about the NDIS, then everyone can breathe a lot easier. And when different levels of government are on the same page, then people don't feel like political football. The reality is that Tony Abbott did support the proposition when we created the NDS. I'm not saying Joe Hockey was totally excited, but I like Joe. The point about it is both sides of politics, Mitch Fifield did support it. And I've worked hard in this term of government with Peter Dutton and with Michael Sukkar, and many of the crossbench too. And that's good. I mean, the Greens are out to lunch, but everyone else is very good. But there was one point which I would just make to all of you, and it was something which Philip said as well. The NDIS is not the property of a minister. I'm very passionate about it, and I've certainly been I wanted to be Prime Minister, but that didn't happen. And in the universe's sense of humour, I got to come back and work on the NDIS, which I'd sort of talked about establishing. So maybe it was the universe having a laugh at me, saying, all right, you got us into this, where do we go? But the point about it is, everything I've been about is not to rely on a particular minister being particularly interested in the detail or being passionate and about, just fighting for things. But I would say I've got no doubt that Labor will pick someone good, and I've got no doubt if the Libs form a government, they will form, this is people realising it's not a retirement lounge portfolio. It shouldn't be viewed as a stepping stone to somewhere else. It's a destination portfolio. It is as important a job as any other job in the government, full stop. But beyond that, what I would say is that if we can get the direction established, and we are through NDS and we are through providers, we are through many of the advocates, we are through families, we are through discussions like this hosted by the Chamber of Commerce, then you don't need to depend on a politician. Because if the direction is agreed, we better have most things registered. We'd like to redo, how we do our needs assessment. There should be supports outside the scheme. Yes, we think that the agency needs to treat people as humans. Yes, we want to stamp out dodgy service provision which treats participants and their families as human ATMs. Once the directions are agreed on, and that's been a big part of building the narrative, it'll be okay. Because the NDIS is the people's scheme. And when we look at, if you get periodically a politician who's not as focused as they should be, you just kick them in the backside and we've got the plan. The point is we've had a sliding doors moment, and if we can stick to the same plan about the future and build that consensus, then it's going to be fine. There was another point made about media coverage and disability. I think what we've got to do is just be committed to the truth. I learnt during the Beaconsfield mine disaster where I was a union rep, some of them, some of the TV stations wanted to say it was like the towering inferno, everyone was going to die every second, the Poseidon adventure, And the mining company wanted to pretend the boys were on holiday down there, just having, a rest. Neither was true. At some points it was incredibly dangerous. But being truthful, and if the disability sector, all of us, if we're truthful about the problems and we promote the good stories, then people will believe that the scheme's in good hands. You can't put your hands over your ears and say there's no problems, even though the bad stories are frustrating. But nor do we've always got to keep relentlessly saying, and, your contribution just reminds us of success, and, Mona, that's fantastic what you're doing with the work you're doing. But there were two other specific matters which I know are of interest to people. One is SDA is the special disability accommodation, and then they're supported independent living packages. They should be run by different operators. And what we're seeing is some of the supported independent living operators taking head leases, get off realestate.com, and maybe the house rental is $1,000. They charge each participant $1,000 a week. That's wrong to begin with. But we've got to keep that clear delineation so that SD work with SIL providers, but I think the future is that you can't give one person that level of control over someone's life. They've got to have a bit of diversity in communication and who's making the dollar. The other thing about navigators is we've got to work that through. But there are great support coordinators. Ben's contribution from SSI was very useful. There are good LACs. There are some good plan managers out there. There's still work for all those people. But what we are going to do is accredit it. At the moment, anyone can call themselves a support coordinator. People, and that's fine. We want people to come into the sector. There's not enough people there now. But we want to have standards. And I've seen really good support coordinators who've got a massive heart, big as Western Australia, but they don't know what they're doing. And that actually doesn't help anyone. So it's all about just improving the quality. But I'll wrap up there and just say the future of the scheme is actually in your hands. What we've tried to establish is an agreed direction. And in the disability sector, you get 3 people, you get 28 opinions. We're trying to get the mainstream working together. And I thank Wally for the opportunity to talk to you all today. Thank you very much.
Just a quick question, Jared and Diallo, do please make your way, and appreciate your support for this event. Karen? Mona, would you please come forward as well? Thank you. Bruno. Thank you.
Yes.
And can I just invite the board quickly, last photo, can you sit up here? Sophie, please, Judy and Nova. Antoinette, quick photo with the Minister. Sophie. Sophie is our chair for the Youth Committee, and please reach out to her. We've got a couple of initiatives going on in November as well. Thank you, guys. There's plenty of food from Davos, and I will thank Dina Khair from Khair Florist for their arrangement.